Hello, everybody. Welcome to what promises to be a really interesting session again here. Despite the many opportunities of the streaming age, measuring the value of IP in the absence of consistent criteria and full transparency remains a challenge for producers. To delve into this, we're delighted to be joined by Caryn Mandabach, the powerhouse producer behind one of the most critically acclaimed and much-loved hit dramas of recent times, Peaky Blinders, and by Julia Alexander, the Director of Strategy at innovative global audience analytics company Parrot Analytics. Julia is actually joining us in place of Warad Segar, who has unfortunately been taken ill, and we do wish him obviously a speedy recovery. As the IP owner and producer of Peaky Blinders, Caryn is responsible for maximizing the true worth of the series for many years to come. And Parrot Analytics measures demand in what they define as the attention economy, with their own developed tools that are now used by platforms and producers alike. We're grateful to both for taking the time to give their own informed perspectives on the area, and to Group Editorial Director of WorldScreen, Anna Karagati, for chairing the discussion. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Caryn Mandabach, Julia Alexander, and Anna Karagati. Thank you.
It's wonderful to be back at MIPCOM, isn't it? And I'm delighted to be here with both of you today. So Caryn Mandabach, in case you don't know about her impressive background, is the founder and chief executive of Caryn Mandabach Productions, an award-winning independent television and film production company who produced and owns the BAFTA-winning drama Peaky Blinders, which I'm sure none of you have heard of. An Emmy-winning producer, Caryn's prolific career includes the creation of iconic titles such as Third Rock from the Sun, That 70s Show, and Nurse Jackie, among others. With us also is Julia Alexander, Parrot Analytics Director of Strategy. She consults clients on tectonic shifts in the technology, media, and telecommunications industries, with a strong focus on building streaming businesses, theatricality, and mergers and acquisitions. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for
having
us.
So exciting. So, Caryn, just because nobody's heard of Peaky Blinders, nor of its huge success, and just on the back of the final season of the series, winning UK's National Television Awards for Best Drama and Best Actor?
Yep.
Am I leaving anything out? Your current show continues to be a fan favorite. Shall we take a look at it before we start the conversation?
Yes.
Okay, let's roll it.
The bodies and the rhythm. Nothing will compare. One more time. One more time. I open the door wide.
We have a very powerful enemy.
I wanted to survive.
This will be the end of it.
Take a good look, Tom. Because one of us isn't going to be here for long.
One last deal to be done. Then my Peaky Blinders rest.
So, Caryn, I like to put conversations into context, and let's take a step back for a minute to better understand where we are today. So when linear channels dominated the TV landscape, there were accepted metrics, right, to measure a show's ratings and success. Tell us about your previous hit shows that you produced and the landscape within which they aired.
Well, before Dirt, a really long time ago, I did The Cosby Show, which had a giant explosive impact on the business because we didn't expect we'd even be in the top 3. We'd be behind Tom Selleck and Magnum PI, you know. But we also shot it in New York, which no one had shot in New York since On the Waterfront. I mean, it was an incredibly moribund place to shoot, to be. Our offices were in a condo. You know, we had to dial 1-718, blah, 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 to talk to each other. But an unexpected hit, well, there's nothing like it. And then, by the way, the week before, the Sunday before it premiered on a Thursday, the TV Guide, which was the paper of record, announced on the cover, "Comedy is dead." And we premiered, there's a difference, as everyone here probably knows, between a rating and a share. And when we started going up into the 50s, the late 50s, 57 share, meaning 57% of the available audience of anybody who was available to watched The Cosby Show. It started to get crazy. And then toward the end of the run, we did see a culture and feel a cultural impact because it did, I believe, help to end apartheid, what have you. There was a material appreciation for it from the advertisers right away, but I think we were all just wildly shocked at what cultural impact feels like, in addition to actual numbers like that. Millions, 57% of whatever millions, 180 million people or whatever.
So comedy wasn't dead.
So it turns out comedy wasn't dead, yeah.
And what's happened since? Like, we could talk about this for hours, but briefly, what's happened since? And
well, I was just saying just a minute ago with you guys, you have to get lucky early. And that's never going to change. You know, I just lucked out early that I was the producer. I moved to New York. I was pregnant with my second kid, and I had a 3-year-old, and no one had ever been in New York since On the Waterfront. You know what I mean? So, not to mention the fact there were zero black writers, black camera pullers, black anything. So Bill kept saying he wanted the authenticity. So I think what's happened since then is authenticity, and also just communicating across space and time is still the way to have a hit.
Yeah, I think also if we think about what television was 30, 40 years ago, there were very limited channels and very limited spaces for attention to collect. And so you could program into a certain hour or a certain couple of hours to make a block, and you could genuinely try to figure out the type of share of demand that you were going to have within that space. And with the birth of, you know, really the mobile revolution, if we think of the iPhone release in 2006, 2007 as a key revolutionary moment, and then the App Store enabling the current future that we are entering, I think we look at the level of attention has just split into a billion different areas. So when you're programming television, you're programming for that TV to be watched potentially in a certain time slot, but also, you know, plus 3 days on streaming, people rediscovering old hits and watching it on their phones via TikTok and YouTube clips. So I think we really need to take into consideration just how that fracturing of the space changes how we both go about acquiring shows, producing shows, and understanding the audience for those shows locally and globally.
And again, Caryn, I imagine that in this new environment where once the accepted metrics helped remuneration for you, now that is a little bit more complicated?
Well, the one thing that happened during the, before the pandemic, but the one thing that happened during Peaky's long run, it started in 2012, there were a number of things that were giant industry changers. One was social media. And had I not known about Parrot Analytics, I really, really would have wished them into existence, because obviously Netflix wouldn't let you know. We had no idea. I remember where I was when I was talking to you guys on the phone. I was in the car, actually. My husband was driving in the West Country in England. And it was so astonishing. If you had told me that we'd be the #1 show in Brazil, you know, or some bizarre I couldn't have known. So because we never got any feedback, the best thing that happened to me was Parrot Analytics, actually, that I got feedback, because I had no idea. I knew it was an incredibly big, important product for the wonderful BBC. I knew that. But that's the biggest thing and a good thing that happened. In terms of remuneration, it's still being discussed. I mean, I don't know. It used to be easy, and now it's not. I was saying earlier today that used to be the 80-20 rule. If you produce something in the US, 80% of your revenue would come from domestic repeats, 20% would come from the ROW, and then it started to reverse. And I started to notice it reverse because I started the distribution company. You could see it was starting to be a little more of the revenue was coming from the ROW. So I think it's still a giant discussion how people, and the Writers Guild and everybody's no longer, packaging is no longer in existence. So there's so many fine-tuned structures that enable you to either get paid or not. It's just that we're in the middle of it now. I don't know how it ends.
Right. So Julia, consequently, given this upheaval, given that we viewers have the freedom to watch on any device, any screen we want, what are production, distribution, and programming executives no longer able to know? What decisions are difficult for them today?
One of my favorite things to talk about is that we are still trying to operate in an apples-to-apples environment, an environment where you could look at 5 shows at 8 p.m. on Tuesday and say, here's where the share of the audience is, here's what the demo of that audience is. And we are in an apples-to-bananas, apples-to-kumquats world, where you really can't do that. And especially if we take into account the fact that there is this giant walled garden that producers and production companies and networks and studios are operating in. They actually don't know what the value of their title is to a streamer like Netflix or an HBO Max, because that information is held so close to their chest. So not only is Peaky Blinders exceptionally brilliant as a show, but also performs well locally, it's got a huge travelability factor, which means that in many different countries around the world, people on Netflix are signing up or staying signed up to watch that show. So what does that mean for the value of that title, both to every single partner across that chain and in terms of the value, in terms of revenue that goes to Netflix? And just along those lines, we have a little sizzle reel actually that I think we can roll that goes into this a little bit.
Great, let's watch the sizzle reel.
Why should audience demand drive your strategic content decisions? These days, you're competing in the consumer attention economy. Only Parrot Analytics provides deep insights across the entire content lifecycle, giving you the confidence you need to underpin your most important decisions every step of the way. To understand how demand drives monetization, choose the entertainment analytics partner that invented global demand measurement. Get access to demand data that answers questions like, how should we decide what story gets the green light? How much is a series worth to a global streaming platform? What kind of shows maintain audiences and attract new ones? To what extent is demand for talent driving the value for a series or a movie? Discover what your current audience wants and future audience demands with Parrot Analytics.
Now introducing the world's first content valuation system, powered by Parrot Analytics.
So, exciting. Because of the way that our demand system works, because we can collect demand expressions from over 2 billion data inputs looking at tens of thousands of shows and movies and talent, we can actually prescribe a numerical value to each of those entities across any part of the production line, right through to selling, across any distribution platform. So the reason that this is so key right now is because of that walled garden situation I was talking about, and understanding, because of all these distribution pathways that have opened, what is the most valuable place for a show dependent on either the seller or the buyer. And so if we think about, what questions that are at the core of our business, would this serve a linear audience better, or actually could this go to a streamer? Is this something that's going to provide value by hiring retention across high-risk churn customers? Is this going to bring in new customers in a taste cluster or within a white space opportunity that isn't being reached? Is this something that we want to license for 5 times what we could be getting for it by going to someone else we didn't even consider? That's what content valuation is for. It's really designed to kind of help everyone across the chain. And with producers, this is a conversation I talk to producers about all the time. They don't have information from the streamers about what their show is worth. They might get told your show is really popular amongst women 3 to 95. And it's like, great, awesome, but they can't make any financial decisions on that. They can't negotiate with that. This is to help producers as well as the buyers understand what is the true value of your show and what more could you get for it somewhere else.
I would also add that what does the value mean? This is our first conversation. In other words, like, how deeply do people feel? Not just how many people have it on while they're ironing. And when I learned that Peaky is really felt, it's a wide audience, but it's a deep one. People love it. And to measure demand generally implies I need to feel it. I've got to go. And we've got, like, I don't know how many billions of TikTok views, as well as giant Instagram and Facebook following, because they really connect with it. So what you're helping to do is helping not just to monetize, you're helping to impact the way people feel. Because that's my job. My job is to make you think, and my job is to make you feel. So if you can help me, the producer, sure, yay, I'd love to make money. But the important thing, as I was saying about Cosby long ago, to move people, and more importantly, to see what connects us. I'm fascinated to know, when you read the report they gave us, what connects us is more than what divides us. And now what you're giving us is a big thing about how we all feel. And really, we all have families, we all have love interests, we all want to be part of a middle-class economy. And what we've learned from you is that we all have more in common than we think. I thought it was just a good giant hit for BBC, but when I learned where it's popular and who, what cohort, it really made me think highly of not just myself, obviously, but the industry itself. It's powerful.
And Caryn, to follow up, what does this system, how does it help producers decide whether or not to develop something new?
Well, there's so many aspects of the business that I could only answer from my small little corner of it. But hits can come from anywhere as long as people are experiencing something similar to it. It may not be, we were discussing this on the way, it may not be your family, but it's someone's family. And so family is usually a good place to start with narratives, because I literally was sat next to Michael Wilson the other day, randomly, who owns, the Broccoli and Wilson franchise, James Bond. And, he was saying how great Peaky was because it had a family at the center, and also talked about how fucked up men are. And I just thought, wow, my God, with his, driver and his Bentley outside, you're telling me that? I couldn't believe it. But the goal is to help us connect with you.
The relatability of
it. We all have families, we all have, I have a girl and a boy, it's trying to connect widely and deeply, and we need the feedback, because we just had no idea who's watching it.
Yeah, and I think when you think about, this industry is an industry that celebrates, promotes, and yes, ideally profits off art. But the idea is to shepherd the creative power and the original series that are really hitting home. An analogy I like to use, so I'm sorry if anyone's heard it, I use it all the time, is that data is a lighthouse, right? So if we think about these original shows, what data does and what the content valuation system can do is showcase where there's opportunity. Where is there an ability for a producer or creative team to bring their show to generate strong profits profit, but really connect with an audience. Something that our content valuation system takes into account is something called content affinity, which means, so we see this with Peaky Blinders. For people who watch a show like Peaky Blinders on Netflix, what other shows are they watching, not just on Netflix, but across the board? And if it's got a really strong connection between someone who watches Peaky Blinders and then Squid Game and Stranger Things or whatever it might be, that's more valuable for the Netflix when they're looking to retain customers, especially right now, than to a subscriber who might want that show from an acquisition perspective. But the goal of that lighthouse is to guide the ship and that captain in and to continue having the confidence of people who are on that ship. And that's producers, that's creative directors, that's the ones who understand the heart of television is story.
And also, I would say the difference between inductive and deductive reasoning, you can get to some conclusion from deducing it. You can also come up with it by inducing it. My job is induction, your job is deduction, and the more information I have from my point of view, induction basically means just vibe or gut or whatever. That's all we've got really. But to then get the feedback and find out why you felt that way. Why? I mean, not that you can analyze it to death, because it does require some kind of Steve Knight's understanding on a deep level, and also some of his best efforts, I think, have been in sort of prediction of the future. That he was into the rise of fascism back when he was into the rise of fascism. It's instinctive, and it is also inexplicable. But if you don't have the feedback, you'll make giant mistakes. You can help us avoid mistakes almost more than you can do anything else. And to hear why is invaluable now, because otherwise you just go, gosh, that was just fucking lucky.
Yeah, and I think from that deductive side of things, because there are so many pathways for people to watch content, to pay for content, to watch content for free, the goal is to monetize that demand, right? It's that intent to watch something. And so what we can do with content valuation, which is what we're trying to do with all the producers we work with, the buyers we work with, the sellers that we work with, is to help them find the perfect home. And that includes on the linear level. There are people, there's linear channels that are still thriving, and they're trying to find the best types of shows that are going to encourage longer engagement sessions, longer viewership, which is going to help with advertising across the board. And the ability to say, hey, this local language show is going to perform really well in this network in this country. And then to also say, like what we saw with La Casa de Papel, is this local language show is also going to be a huge global hit, which we could see with our data, and bring that to a Netflix with its audience that has a big Spanish-speaking subscriber base. All of a sudden, you go from having a great local language hit in a regional area to having a massive global hit that spins off a South Korean version to try and attain that same level of success. So that's the deducing from the inducing, but you need that original content to be able to look at it.
I'll tell you one other example of it. It's the only time it's ever happened to me. A guy from distribution at Fox, which had years ago, Fox had just bought baseball. And so the network had to be all male. They didn't even want any women watching Fox, so they just wanted baseball viewers. So the distribution guy says to me, yeah, you need 18 to 49-year-old men. You just don't even think about producing for women. That's just not on. If you want to sell to me, it's got to be men. They've got to be 18 to 49, and smart ass that I am. I said, well, there's no such thing as 18 to 49-year-old men. There are 18-year-old men and 40-year-old men. And then it occurred to me as I walked across the parking lot, how old were you, and what year was it? If you're 40 now, what year was it when you were 18? And the answer was, it was 1976, and I swear to God, I did that 70s show in my head.
Really?
It's the reason was some math guy said to me, don't even think about it. It just has to be about a guy and his son. It's not, the year is 19, in my head I went, 1976. It will never happen again, I'm just saying. But it was an example of it. It was just sometimes it really helps to hear something that, it was so illogical what they said to me, and I had to make sense of it in my, mythologist head.
To expand a little bit about what you were saying about the lighthouse before, and this is for both of you, for the creators in the audience, is the data and information now available primarily for use on the business side, or can it also help creatives?
Both. Obviously, and the best relationship you have with your broadcaster is partner. I want my partner to succeed. I want BBC to succeed. I want Netflix to succeed. You want a great relationship, and they have a point of view. I have a point of view. We'll all mutually benefit. The best thing that can happen is that you love your partner.
I 100% agree. I think we are entering a moment. There was a really, and we know, everyone in this room knows this, there was a really great moment of the last few years of spend, 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 right? The concept, especially in streaming, was that more is better than less, and more is better than more. So we're just going to continue to invest in the space. And as global, macroeconomic headwinds really come into play, and as people on like Wall Street are looking at revenue for a lot of these streaming services that a lot of the linear companies are also getting into and kind of trying to figure out how to supplement that, there's this moment where the value of a title to both the creatives who are trying to sell into a space that's going to get much tighter, and also to the buyers and sellers who are trying to navigate that market, is more key than ever. Valuation of anything has always been key, but what the producers and creators are running into is a system where on linear they can still get certain information that's public or they get access to it, but as they move more into a streamer space, a lot of that information is withheld from them from whatever reason. But I think, bluntly, it really does help the streamers. If they don't have to release numbers, that's great for them to keep it close to their chest. So how do you negotiate? How do you say, well, this is what I want for my second season? You're building a franchise off my show. What is that? What do I get out of it? What is the value? And also to those companies, if we think about a Warner Brothers Television, how much is Ted Lasso worth to Apple TV Plus? That's something they want to know. They love to be able to say they won Emmys off it, but they would also love to make some money and make more money off of that deal. And then in that same scenario, take an Apple, how much is Ted Lasso worth? So across the board, everyone knowing one single a number driven by empirical data valuation really helps to ensure that fairness comes back into play in a way that I don't think we've seen much fairness for a little bit.
Okay, and I imagine, and Caryn, tell me if I'm wrong, one of producers' goals, not the only one, but is to see renewals and to see more seasons and to see the development of the franchise. Mm-hmm. What tools are now available to help with brand extension? And I'm sure that's something that interests you.
The same old tools that ever were, which is the writer in television, the writer, and also I am very protective of Peaky Blinders. I come at it, everyone would say, well, that's my baby. Yep, it's true. I'm really protective of it, and I know its DNA, and I feel when something good is going to happen, and I feel when something bad is going to happen. So there's no smart answer, except for I did, sit next to Michael Wilson, and he was not jealous of me, but he actually went, wow, that's so good. And then he said, do you know Jen Salke at Amazon? And I just thought, wow, I can't believe I'm having this conversation. Or would you like to talk to George Lucas about how he feels about Star Wars? I would. You know what I mean? I really want to know how he feels.
I think we all want to know what George Lucas feels about Star Wars.
You know what I mean? Like, what happened to his franchise and how does he feel? I will say something, too, about just the instinctive thing. The one thing that does travel really significantly is the outsider, or like the orphan, or someone who feels outside the system. So women generally feel outside the system. Or did you know Walt Disney's first 5 movies were about orphans? Yeah, and because it's relatable. I don't mean literally orphans, but I mean like people who feel like they should be there, but they're not. And that's a lot of what Peaky's about as well. So I'm going to protect the future of Peaky because that will still be of the essence to Peaky. I want to get there, but I can't. It's harder. It's harder for me. So that will be in the movie and in the spin-offs and in the games. Web3 or wherever we
And
go.
on the data side, when we can see that level of demand and how that increases value globally, and the entry points from games and the entry points from immersive experiences or whatever it might be, Peaky's a great example of how that could be, because it has such high demand in so many markets. But that increases the value of that franchise, and we can judge franchisability. We have tools for it. But knowing that there is this intrinsic ability to monetize that intent to engage with this across different mediums as we enter the metaverse is really key to also plugging into content valuation, understanding what are my characters worth, even beyond this show,
your characters.
to this company.
Also, too, forgetting language, we just came from seeing the Peaky Blinders ballet. Ballet Rambert took on the Peaky Blinders as a concept. There are no words in a ballet. I don't want to surprise you here, but the fact that it translates so powerfully without words means that you're saying something. It's like talking to a baby or something, or a dog. You feel it. So we're in the feely business, but we need the input, not just for monetary reasons, but also you just don't know, and you can't learn. No one can teach you anything. We need to learn more about our audiences. And someone early on told me that her son and her husband didn't speak. The 18-year-old or 17-year-old son and the father in the news business didn't talk to each other. And the only time they ever talked to each other was about Peaky Blinders. And the other day I was in France having a pizza, and in Paris, and some kid says, and I look at him, I go, I bet you're a Peaky Blinder. He goes, how did you know? And I said, well, your haircut, but also just I could tell. And he said, I haven't spoken to my father in whatever years, but we talk about Peaky Blinders now. And that meant so much to me. I know that's it's a kind of a metric that you learn from, but other than going to have pizza every night, how are you going to learn that?
That's all about the power of storytelling, of great storytelling. It helps us connect, doesn't it?
It does help us connect. But like I said, we don't know what we've got. I'm not your first client, but I just called out of the blue before it was cool, because I wanted the feedback.
You're one of my favorites.
You're one of my favorites, too.
Oh, well,
I really mean it, though.
Unfortunately, our time is up, but what a perfect way to end.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, audience.
Thank you, guys.
All of you for being here today. Thank you.